Hey, y'all, welcome back. I'm really excited about this episode of the podcast. I finally got a chance to sit down and have an in depth conversation about some of the new technologies that are available. We're talking about GPS collars today, but before we get to that, a few messages. This is the first time I've been back in the studio to put an episode together since Thomas Crooks took a few shots at former President Trump. Now, y'all know I'm not a big fan of government, and I voted Libertarian for the vast majority of my adult life, and I try to keep politics and my more radical views off the podcast. That being said, over the last week and a half since that event, I've had a lot of people asking what I think about that attempt. If you want me to talk about what I think is going on, I'd be happy to share my thoughts. I just have to know you want to hear them. So I'm going to make this offer. If there's a subject or topic that you'd like to hear from me about, write me. Send me an email, send me a message, tell me what you want to hear from me about. Tell me what's on your mind. I'm thinking about dropping those solo commentary episodes maybe Thursday or Friday. Maybe also let me know what a good day for you is. What part of the week are you looking for more content? I'd like to know. Just head on over to redhillsrancher.com. Use the contact form. It's the only sure way to get through the spam filters. You can also send me an email directly at redhillsrancher@gmail.com. Okay, are you ready to revolutionize your operation and unlock the full potential of your land and livestock? Look no further than the upcoming Regenerative Wisdom Grazing School this September. Join renowned experts Dale Strickler from my good friend, episode 165, and Dr. Elizabeth Heilman for 3 days of intensive classroom and hands-on instruction in cutting-edge regenerative practices. Learn how to significantly increase pasture productivity and animal carrying capacity. Extend your grazing seasons. Slash cost on feed fertilizer and fencing. Produce delicious tender grass-fed beef in less than 24 months. Increase weaning weights and master livestock sales strategies. But that's not all. If you're interested in small ruminants, like sheep and goats, Greg Christensen and Dale Strickler are also leading a 2-day goat and sheep school. Discover how to access land without breaking the bank, build effective and affordable fencing, control internal parasites economically and efficiently, protect your flock from predators with guardian dogs, and turn weeds into a profitable asset. Don't miss these great opportunities to transform your ranch and create a thriving, sustainable agricultural enterprise. Register now for the Regenerative Wisdom Grazing School and take your operation to the next level. For more information and to register, visit www.regenerativewisdom.com/ranching-school. There'll be a link in the show notes. Make sure you click that if you didn't catch it. Make sure you're watching my socials. Dale and I are trying to work out a scholarship deal. Maybe we'll be able to refund one lucky listener's fees for one of those schools. Speaking of social media, it seems like all of my feeds are full of ads, promoted content, crap I don't care about. The algorithms are pushing way more sponsored content than organic content. If you want to fight that, visit pages that you want to interact with, visit the pages that you want to see. Scroll around for a bit, share a post, interact with some of those posts. Watch the videos to the end. Those are the kind of things that keeps Red Hills Rancher and Ranching Reboot content in your feed. Well, I guess anybody's content you want to see, it kind of works for that. The more you interact, the more of it you're going to see. And if some of that's my stuff, great. If not, I hope you at least improve your algorithm. All right, moving on. Support for this episode is provided by my amazing patrons on patreon.com/redhillsrancher and the subscribers on Spotify. Thank you so much for your continued support. And if you would like to join the growing ranks of podcast supporters, just head on over to patreon.com/redhillsrancher or click the links in the show notes. Just this morning as I was putting this episode together, I talked to my friend Aaron Sawyers, the director over at No Till on the Plains. And he's told me that he's got a few seats left on the bus for the upcoming bus tour. If you're looking for a great time, awesome tour stops, and a chance to meet some new people, you need to be on the bus. I can't wait to meet some new friends and see old ones. I'm looking forward to catching up with Rick Bieber and seeing what's new on his farm. I can't wait to go to visit Minokan Farm and then the legendary Copper Barn at Blackleg Ranch, where you already know we're going to have dinner on the second night. And you know what? They've got a brewery right there on site there in that big copper barn. I don't drink, but I'm told J. Doan's beer is some of the best around. There's more stops, more to see, more to learn. So get on the bus. Just navigate to notill.org and click the events tab. That's notill.org and check the events tab. You can also type no-till bus tour into Google and it'll get you right there. Don't wait. The last few seats are going fast. Get on the bus. All right, that's a lot of words. My guest today is Ben Notterman. Ben operates Snug Valley Farm in Vermont, and he's here to talk about his experience over the last year with NoFence collars. The NoFence collars come out of Norway, I believe it is, and there's just one of many GPS collars that are available. I've been hearing about them since, like 2017, 2018, when my friend Christine Sue, founder of Pasture Map, introduced me to the concept of a Fitbit for cows. Sounded pretty simple, and some of the implications of that technology really, really excited me. And as we've gone forward, the technology, the challenges, and difficulties of building a device that does its job while hanging off the neck of a cow for 6 months at a time, they're still being worked out. This isn't a sales pitch, just a couple of land managers and stockmen talking about new tech and some of its peaks and valleys. All right, that's enough of the business. Here's what you came for. Hey, Ben. Thanks for joining me this morning. How are you, buddy?
Well, I'm well. How you doing this morning, Brian? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing pretty good. I was going to try to get out to the ranch early this morning and check a few things over before this. Had a little rain shower last night. Got just about 2 inches here at the house and 7 miles south down at the ranch. Dad reports they got 3. So I'm just going to record this podcast and wait a little bit till it warms up and maybe dries out, and the soil will support me driving around and not get stuck today.
There you go. That's a good approach to a wet day, I think.
Yeah. I mean, where we've been setting, I just looked at the drought monitor last night, and for those of you out there listening, we recorded this like 2 weeks ago. I was looking at the drought monitor last night, and we're in D1. That's pretty cool. We kind of haven't seen D1. Well, we were in D4 last year in like coming into June, and by the mid-July, we were in D0, and then we just kind of slowly crept back up to, I think we were in D3 a couple weeks ago. So now we're back to D1, which is good. Ponds look good, creeks look good, grass looks great. Just one other thing to deal with, I guess.
That's the rain is always the unknown, or the dry is always the unknown. It's we gotta have to learn how to manage for one or the other or both back to back really quickly, which is challenging.
I mean, and we can call it climate change. I just think the climate that we've been used to, or the climate that we think has been happening for the last 150 years, it's changing, and it's going to change. It's changing pretty quick. Kind of speaking of that, I was just looking, and the last time we did this was almost exactly a year ago.
Yeah, that was end of June, early July, something like that.
Yeah. Probably end of June, released in July, something like that.
Yep.
And if I recall, you had just gotten, I believe it's NoFence collars at the time.
That's correct. We're still rolling with NoFence collars this summer. So it's been quite an experience, quite a learning experience, but also a very, very handy tool.
Well, I want to hear about them because, everybody that listens knows I've been interested in collars since they're still a pie in the sky thing like 6 years ago. So I guess tell me a little bit about the NoFence collar. Like give us a little bit of background on what it looks like and what it does.
So it's essentially a modern day cowbell. So this is, like I said, this is our second summer using the NoFence collars. They're a Norwegian company, and they've been in Norway and Northern Europe for close to 10 years. So we're a little bit behind on the technology bubble, I guess. European ag seems to be light years ahead of us in all the technology things, tractors, GPS collars, all the stuff. So we're part of a pilot study with the Agritech Institute for Small Farms, which is a small innovation group here in Vermont, run by a couple of fellows, Dan Pitt and Roger Albee. So we were selected as a pilot farm to test these out, to check the viability here in Vermont, make sure, to see if it works in our state, in our geography, in our terrain. And so I got selected somehow. We're kind of known here at Snug Valley Farm for doing crazy shit and trying new things, ultra high density grazing, stuff that makes the neighbors go, what are they doing? What nonsense are they up to now? So, like I said, we had collars last summer. There was a very steep learning curve, more so on the human end than the cattle end. This summer we went into the grazing season with a lot more knowledge, and we didn't have to relearn or jump over all the hurdles that we faced last summer. So NoFence is a GPS virtual fence collar that uses both cellular signal, and GPS location. So the collars are updated by a cell signal or Bluetooth from your phone if there is no cell signal. And then the GPS portion, so you can track the animals inside their paddock and kind of denote their activities, head up, head down, inactivity. So you have a collar slip off, collar hasn't moved in 6 hours, you'll get a push notification to your phone, or hey, this collar hasn't moved in 24 hours. Like, it doesn't say maybe you have a dead animal or the collar definitely slipped. It'll let you know something's wrong. These collars have been quite a game changer. Granted, we're only running 43 this summer. Last summer we ran 63. So we gave 20 collars back to the study to put it on another farm. Because last year we were the only operation in Vermont using them because there were some technology issues. And so they brought more farms on to pilot this for year 2. So I gave a portion of those collars back so another farm could collar up some animals.
Okay. I guess I wanted to ask what they look like, but this being primary audio format.
Hold on. I got one right here.
Okay. Good reason to go check out the video on YouTube or on Spotify.
There you go. So I just happen to have my spares here in the office. So I don't know. I can't see my camera, so you have to tell me if it's in frame. So this is a modern day cowbell, essentially.
Okay. What we're looking at here, we're looking at like a black plastic box that's got 2 chrome or like stainless steel or galvanized chains, and then they connect up top like a rubber link.
The rubber, like a rubber pad. It has adjustability, so you can adjust up and down the chains to accommodate different animal sizes, from calves, yearlings up to fats or mother cows.
So the chains are what deliver the shock, and then the insulator part at the top keeps them from shorting.
Right. And I guess there's a comfort factor there also. It's a wide rubber strap so they don't get chafed. So on one side of the black box, I guess, is a solar panel, which helps offset the power usage of the battery or of the collar itself, the location and the notifications through the cell signals and all the updating and such. The other side is just a fancy serial number. So, and the battery inserts into the bottom.
Okay.
And this one does not have a battery in it at the moment. It probably weighs 3 pounds, 2.5, 3 pounds of the battery in. So it's not overly heavy.
Okay.
And probably not super noticeable on if you're a cow or a beef.
Battery looked replaceable, so you can replace the battery while it's still on the animal.
You definitely need a head catch or a good chute to catch them in. The batteries are meant not to fall out, so they're not super friendly to remove by hand. I found a set of nippers from we had from old Farrier tongs work really well to depress both buttons on the battery, and you can slide it out. After 2 or 3 by hand, your hands are like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. It's really tough, but with those pliers, they slide right in and out pretty easily.
since we're talking about batteries, has battery life been a problem, or has it been a non-issue?
Yeah. Last summer it was an issue, and we kind of had the thought it might be because in Europe, they still have a 2G like data, like low power data cell network over the not for phones, but for like these lower data needed or lower
Lower bandwidth.
intensity. Yeah, there we go. Sorry. And we don't have that here. Everything here is 4G or 5G, depending on where you are. And so the batteries were getting depleted quickly last summer because of the 5G and 4G cell signal, not because it was more demand on the components to like send updates, but because the sine wave, whatever,
It's a higher
maybe
power transmission.
yeah. So essentially, the higher power transmission was sapping the batteries of their power, not through the transfer of data, just getting like irradiated or pelted by those higher power signals. So let me see. Do I have one in here? Maybe. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. So in our full tinfoil hat fashion, this is the solution that NoFence came up with.
Hold it
Reflective aluminum tape that
Okay.
goes over half the battery around the corner. This is a stopgap. They're getting me updated fielded batteries from the manufacturer sometime second half of July. So this was let's get this up and running. So they're incorporating the fielding now inside the battery, so it won't be affected by the higher power cell signal.
Okay.
So last summer, in probably around August 1, I pulled the group of cattle I brought them back from the other side of town where they're grazing. I brought them to the corrals, trucked them here back to the home place, replaced the batteries or took all the batteries out, charged them all and put them back in. So they had dropped from 100% down to like 30% in 2.5 months or so.
Okay. That
Or-
was the
or 2
question I
months.
was going to ask is like, what was the time and how much they lose? So 2 months?
Yeah, about 2 months. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was
Go ahead.
pre-shielding. So we're still rolling right now, and most of my batteries are right now, and we're over a month into the grazing season here in northern Vermont, are at like the 85, 90%. In an ideal world, they'll stay 90 to 100%, being their battery power usage being offset by the solar panel if the cell signal power doesn't interrupt it.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So what was battery life like last year? Was it pretty much that every 2 months you had to come in and change batteries?
It got progressively worse through the summer. Like we charged the first week in August or so, and then they grazed through, it was like mid-September. I think I got like 45 or 50 days. So it was like 15 days less or so than the first go around. And the engineers were thinking it was something because of like longer exposure to the high power cell signal. They were losing vitality or longevity. So the aluminum foil tin hat method is a stopgap for us to get till they give us the updated batteries.
That's interesting. That's interesting, and it's interesting problem solving. We'll just put a little bit of metal. We'll just wrap the battery in metal tape.
I'm going to put my foil hat on and I'll put some tape on the battery. We'll call this good. Yeah.
Okay. It sounds like you kind of weren't using them over the winter, and you've just kind of gone back to them.
Right. So being in northern Vermont, we don't really graze through the wintertime. We get a lot of snow and a lot of wet, and the ground is very soft and not super agreeable to grazing through the wintertime. So all the critters pretty much go to wintertime feed yards or a barn of some kind and we feed stored baleage through the wintertime from maybe end of November, first part of December through like the 1st of May to the 10th of May, depending on the growing season.
Okay.
So it's a sizable time on stored feed, which is not most economical, but necessary.
Okay. So last summer when you were still grazing and just kind of getting used to the collars, what was your movement scheme? What was your grazing plan kind of like?
So pretty much on all of our properties that we manage and all the groups that we graze, we strip grades. Our most of our pastures are all of our pastures are set up with 3-wire high tensile electric fence. And then there's some interior divisions with single wire high tensile fence. And we pretty much strip grades, just step the group forward every day in those pastures using, like Gallagher reel step-in posts. So daily moves or every other day moves, depending on the group, the grass, what we as the human end of things have going on. If it's holiday weekend, we're probably going to set them up with like 2 or 3 days worth of grass. But if it's during the week, we'll go every day. So we're doing frequent moves. So the collars and the virtual paddocks really took the place of the daily step-in posts and reel setup and take down. So we're able to do that from the app on our phone, which is absolutely wild. Like to think like I can move a group of cows, I don't have to be there, and I can keep them in the zone that I want to keep them in, and I don't even have to go look at, make sure that they're staying in, because I can do everything from my phone, which is it's good and it's bad. Definitely it's handy.
So now the question that everybody wants answered: how high can you push stock density with the collars?
You can push it pretty darn high. Let's see, that group I was running last summer, before we had some pretty historic flood in the beginning of July, probably right after we recorded the podcast. So up to that, we were running pretty dry. And then the light switch or the water switch flipped and we went to heavy wet for the season. So I was, I'd have to look back at my grazing chart, my grazing notes, but I think we were 150,000 pounds to the acre at a few times, and I could crank them more, but I was also then realizing that battery life was dwindling. So obviously with higher stock density, smaller paddocks, you have more frequent moves and that much more power that we would have been eating up on the battery. So I was trying to be conservative on moves, but we did 150,000 pounds a few times. With our polywire.
Sorry to interrupt you, but that 150,000 pounds with the collars, you had fence on 3 sides and you were just moving one barrier virtually, right?
No, that was inside virtual fence. So there might have been a hard wire on one side, like or a high tensile wire where their water was, like where their water tank was.
And then the other 3 were virtual barriers?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you got them at 150,000 pounds?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now we're talking about getting something done. Now we're talking about something.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm a big fan of high density. I've run 500,000 to 600,000 pounds with polywire, just because I know it's hot and they will respect it. So it's exciting to see that we can almost do nearly the same thing with the collars as we can with polywire. I haven't pushed it that high yet because our ground's kind of in a tender stage right now because we're so super saturated on water. So depending on what happens through the rest of the summer, we'll see where we end up. Our typical stock density for the group with the collars is 30 to 35,000 pounds an acre in our daily typical moves.
Okay. And there's no problems with that, with animal density or collars dying?
Not yet. I mean, that's kind of our baseline. So I haven't done like a full rotation of super high density or higher density to 150. I feel like the battery life might not keep up with that until we get the updated batteries. So I'm just kind of walking the line until we get the updated batteries, and then I'll experiment more with cranking them down and tightening up.
Speaking of battery life, are you still kind of around that 2 to 3 months turnaround window for a battery recharge?
Possibly. I mean, like I said, we're at that 80 to 90% level because I can look on inside the app and look at every collar's battery. There's a few that are in like the 60s, but those are the animals that always test the fence, always test the line. Like we'll go up and down the line. So it's constantly putting out the audio tone, which is like the pre-warning to the shock. And then there are some that maybe they're deaf. I don't know, but only learn the fence line by the shock, which obviously then takes some battery life. So it all has, a lot of it has to do with the disposition of the animal. Is it the one that always tests the fence, or is it the higher battery life ones right now are the ones that hang back and watch the idiots get shocked on the line or find a line for them? If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that kind of makes sense. I think back to when I was a kid back in the late 80s and early 90s, and my dad was experimenting with a little bit of electric fence, and the equipment and the equipment and the things that were available back then. Man, if I had to fence this whole ranch with the stuff that dad had in like 94, I wouldn't have done it. I mean, it was rough. Um, and I don't know where I was going with that. The I guess I go back to battery life. Oh, I know where I was going. Okay. Um, I remember watching animals try to learn electric fence, and I remember hearing, the old cowboys that had been around, since the 50s and 60s being like, "Oh, that electric fence crap, that'll never work. That'll never work. Those cows just, you know, it just won't work. You got to have barbed wire. They got to feel the pain. That fence just doesn't work." And now here we are in 2024, where we've got a cow herd in the US that almost all of them have seen electric fence now. And a lot of them will just stand behind wet dental floss because they think it's hot, because they've been exposed to it since they were a calf. And I'm wondering if, I guess where I'm going with this is like, is there the adaptation period for the animals? Like you're talking about, there's some that act like they're deaf and just want to run down the line and get shocked every time to learn where the fence is. It seems like maybe there were some animals that just couldn't adapt and couldn't understand electric fence, back in the past. We cull those, right? We get rid of the ones that are bad, they're quote bad disposition, that don't fit into our system, that won't play ball with the other cows. Uh, so, and I get you've only had them for a year, but in your experience, what's it been like trying to get the animals used to the collars and train the animals to the collars? Are some just not accepting it?
We don't really give them an option to reject it. So the thing is with the collars, like the group has to be together for the whole season. Like you can't have 10 that have the collar and 10 that don't have the collar, because that they'll just the 10 with the collars will end up following the 10 without the collars through the fence, and that's a management train wreck waiting to happen if that's, and no fence recommends that you don't do. So we train them as a cohort. So we put the 40 odd collars on this group of yearlings, knowing that this group would graze the entire season together, so that we're not adding in animals and we're hopefully not taking any animals out. Like it's like a static group. So the training period, I want to say we put the collars on a Thursday morning. And then by the following Tuesday, we moved them they were inside a training paddock, like a 4 or 5 acre high tensile fence, sacrifice training paddock that had good growth of grass in it. They were the first ones to go in there. And they learned the line very quickly. Like it was a day or two of getting whacked and then going back and then learning that the audio is the precursor to the zap, and then figuring out what that is. Like, oh, okay, when I hear the audio, I can go 4 more steps or 3 more steps before I get whacked by the shock. So I can still get that grass. I just know that I'm getting close to where I'm going to be forced to turn around. So it was like a 3 or 4 day training process. We kind of observed. We didn't this year take any out of the group that weren't respecting it, because they were all always on the correct side of the line. Last year there was one that was just bonkers, like high-headed. I should never have even tried that one in the group. And it was high-headed, running, didn't respect 3-wire high tensile fence that was very hot. So they weren't respecting the collar, and apparently had a very high pain tolerance. So we pulled that one back in and took the collar off. That animal did not get an opportunity to go out with the rest of the group on the collars.
Did she go to freezing?
I think I sold her in a group to another beef producer. I was like, this is a heck I don't want. And this guy was a confinement feed operation, so it didn't matter. There wasn't a whole lot of electric fence to worry about over there.
What's his problem now anyway?
And I think it probably performed very, very well. And I will say it was a Charolais, black nose Charolais, which are typically the Charolais in general, in my experience, have been very high headed. I know there's some Char producers that are able to produce the calmest blondes, but I, in Northern Vermont, have never had calm Char ever.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't have any experience with wild Charolais. Like most of my experience with Charolais, they're just, they're pretty mild. Maybe they're a little bit more, maybe sometimes they're a little bit more flighty than your average black cow, but I get along good with Chars. Like
I like them.
Some chrome, smoking chrome sells well.
It's I don't know. It's usually like I get from a producer, I'll get like 2 or 3 Char crosses, and out of that group, they're the highest headed, they're the flightiest, they're the most. As soon as you cross over the wire or it's you at the edge of the paddock, their little radar dishes are up, they're watching you, and everybody else still has their heads down and grazing. And then you put them in a winter feed situation for us, for obviously it's a lot tighter quarters. They have barn access and feed line access for haylage. And it's there you can walk up to go push out feed or check for mineral or clean the water. And they are on the other side of the pen watching you, radar dishes up, just like, even though they've been around you for 9 months, know you're not a threat. They just never seem to give that up. And maybe I'm just getting the wrong Chars, that could be too.
It could just be kind of a local thing, Ben, honestly.
Right. Yeah.
I know I sit here thinking like, the Charolais cattle come from a fairly compact region in France. That's, maybe half the size of Vermont. And, we've got people running Charolais every corner of this country. And there's bound to be differences between East and West and, different populations and genetic reservoirs. From my experience, the ones that are high-headed, crazy, and as soon as you're anywhere close, they've got their ears up and they're paying attention to you. Those are the tiger stripes. Those are the ones that are half or a quarter Brahma, and they're the ones that I watch out for. I don't. The smokes and chromes, I'm not worried about them. I don't worry about them. The stripy ones with big ears, don't turn your back on one.
Never had one be aggressive. It's just like they're always want to be in the furthest corner of the paddock or as far away from you. Or if I open the fence, like open the poly wire so they can move ahead a strip, they just like charge through every time. And I like to think I have pretty decent stockmanship skills, and I'm a very low pressure guy. And we don't use, I don't have a hot shot on the place, nothing like that. Just, it always seems to be a Char. Sometimes there's black ones that are the same, but I can guarantee if there's a Char, it's going to be one of those. And I don't know, maybe that's a Northern Vermont anecdote or just an instance, but sorry to any Char folks that I offended.
That's okay. Kind of wondering about like testing the audio alert. Do you see them a lot, like walk through the audio alert, take those other 2 or 3 steps between the audio alert and where they would get shocked? And do you see a lot of them hang out there, or do they eventually like start to respect that audio alert more?
They do pretty much respect the audio alert once they're in tune to it. The only time I see them in that in-between zone is if I've left them in a paddock for like 6 hours too long, and that's where the grass still is. Or if I've left them, I should have moved them in the morning and I don't get there till the afternoon, or, life happens, ranch happens, farm happens, and I don't get there in time. Then they're like in that zone, and I'll get notifications on my phone. I can look in to see how many times XYZ collar has had audio alerts, how many times they've been shocked. And if I see a whole lot of them are in the audio zone, I'm like, ooh, I know I should have been there like 3 hours ago.
Time to go move a fence.
And that's the thing, like I don't have to go there to do it, but I hadn't done it yet. So I don't have to physically drive to the other side of town and go move them. I can just move their front line on their paddock.
Okay. have you gained any insights into animal behavior by watching which cows do what activity, or by looking at like the grazing heat maps? Have you been able to learn anything about animal behavior from actually being able to know where they've been all day and track their movements?
It's really interesting because we have I don't know, it's common here in the Northeast, bed straw, which is kind of a ground creeping semi-invasive. I don't know if it's a native invasive or a foreign invasive, but it creeps in where it can get a toehold in the soil and it covers a lot of ground. So I've been using the heat maps, which for the listeners, it shows you where they're hanging out when where their collars get pinged the most, and it'll show you over the paddock. You could do like 24 hours, 2 days, or 1 week. I think at the time intervals you can go back if they're a large paddock, obviously a week.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
ours
and
are
it
only in
shows
there.
it shows where they've spent their time
Right, right.
during that period, so you can tell, like, if they spent all the time on, the south end of this paddock. I go over there and look, what's here? A bunch of big blues.
Exa-
Where did they not go? And I go look and see what's there. So that's
ex-
like,
ex-
that's what I want to know.
Exactly. So I've been paying attention to like what are they're going into a really nice lush paddock. What are they hitting first? And I'll go kind of walk the paddock sometimes before they go in there if it's a move that I'm at the place for, and then watch them over the next 6 or 8 hours where they go on the heat map on the app. And then I'll go back and go, oh, they were eating bed straw here, or oh, they didn't touch the clover, they were going after the orchard grass, or oh, there was a little bit of birdfoot trefoil here. So it's like that they zoned in on whatever they're deficient in. And recently they have all been going to bed straw first. So there must be it's either really sweet right now, or it has a mineral they're lacking and they're trying to balance in. It's just really interesting to see what they hit first. I mean, there's like beautiful orchard grass that will pack the pounds on, but they're going for the bed straw. And it's really amazing how they self-regulate and what they go after first. So I haven't established a cause for any of their what they go after first, but it's really interesting to see what they target.
I was sitting here thinking about, okay, how could you design that study to collect the maximum amount of useful data about using the grazing heat maps and actually going out and ground truthing and seeing what they've been eating, and then maybe test that plant, like test it, put it in your refractometer, see how much bricks it is, maybe clip it and send a sample to the lab so they can tell you what the crude protein is of why they're eating it. Uh, it- I think that's one of the great questions that we really need to answer, because everybody says, well, cows eat grass. Well, yeah, cows eat grass. They also eat a shitload of weeds, and I've seen them eat trees too. So why are they eating those things? And that's it. But how do you find out? If you've got the whole group is going to go over and eat a thing, okay, then the whole group is deficient in that thing, or there was something there that attracted the whole group. But if you've got like 98 out of 100 animals eaten in one part, and you've got two that are kind of running around, like one goes and eats on a hedge tree and the other one goes and eats sagebrush. Why are they doing that? If only I'm sure out there somewhere there's a ranch with plenty of money and too many employees that are underemployed that have time to do things like this. But that's that's what really would get me interested is, let's look at the heat map and then let's go test what they ate and measure what they ate and left behind and see and try to figure out why.
Absolutely. That also intrigued me, and it also goes back to that time and resource that being a small crew here that we don't necessarily have. I think that'd be great. One of the nonprofit ranches to a study to take up, where they have lots of funding, or even just regular ranch that's got enough to do it. I think that would be really interesting to see what the results are.
Yeah. So let's talk about the learning curve. Any more to say about the learning curve for the animals on the collar side?
They had it a lot easier than the human, so they learned it in 3 or 4 days, and it took us on the management end of things much longer than that to learn it. So they picked it up probably faster than we did.
Okay. What were some of the challenges that you had on your side?
Timing of the move, like leaving them a little bit too long or not long enough in a paddock because you're not always going to look. You're not like necessarily boots on the ground there. The second is actually transitioning them from paddock to paddock. For the first bunch of, I think the first 2 or 3 weeks, we were trying to abut paddocks so that they shared like a common line on the app. And we were having a heck of a time for the cattle to cross that line because they were so ingrained, like, I can't cross this line without getting buzzed or shocked.
So you were trying to move them across the virtual barrier vise using
Yes.
the gate and the fence.
Essentially a gate defense or just so inside the app, there's a, there's the paddock that they're in or the pasture they're in, call it paddock. And then there's the paddock you want to move the 40 or 60 collars into. If you have the two paddocks sharing a line, one or the other of the two paddocks, no matter how you do it, seems to want to shock the animal when they cross it, whether it's the new one or the old one. And then the animal gets confused. Like, I'm getting mixed signals here. I know I'm supposed to move ahead because I know there's fresh grass there and that's what we're supposed to do, but I can't get across this line without getting an audio buzz or a snap.
Because
So
the
there's like,
doesn't know which
it
side
doesn't,
line it's supposed to go to. And and maybe that was something I should have asked earlier. Like, okay, when an animal gets out, okay, so they've gone past the audio alert, they go to the shock stage, and they keep walking through the shock. How many more steps do they go, or do they keep getting? How many more steps do they go before it stops, like trying to shock them all the time?
I don't know the distance off the top of my head, but I want to say it's like 8 or 10 meters so if they go 8 or 10 meters past the hard shock line, they'll continue to get shocked in an effort to turn them around. But once they go past that line, the shocking stops and the audio stops. So, and cows being or beef being a herd animal, if it's one animal, it then feels like, whoa, I'm exposed out here. I don't like this. I want to go back with my buddies. So they can re-enter the paddock without getting shocked or audio buzzed. So that encourages them to rejoin the group that's still inside the virtual fence, which
So the
I
virtual
think is
barrier works most of the time as a one-way barrier, except
correct.
when you have two next to each other and you're trying to move between, and then the system gets confused.
Right. Because we're not running, sub-meter accuracy GPS on these collars. It's like, whatever, the 2 or 3 meter. So you're 2 or 3, there's some variability either side of the virtual line. So the system doesn't really, has a hard time differentiating from a meter too far or a meter in the old paddock versus a meter in the new paddock. So like there's a little bit of variability there depending on, GPS satellite coverage and all the variables that are there. So there led to be confusion. So the way we got around this was you look at the paddock they're in currently, you set your front line in the new paddock where you want it to be, and you set their back line at the back of their current paddock. So you kind of overlap the new paddock with the old paddock. That way that eliminates that buzz and shock line in the middle.
Okay.
And then the collars update, and it takes time for the collars to like load into the new paddock. So that is where the confusion comes in for the cattle. Like some load really quick, some take a little bit more time. The ones who take more time are getting mixed messages because there's some animals already in the new grass that they want to join, but their collar hasn't been updated yet, and they're still getting shocked and buzzed at the line. So that's where we found a lot of the confusion was. So if we overlay the back line at their current back line in the former paddock and just move their front line, they'll drift into the new grass, and then once they're there, you just reopen the app and you move the back line to where you want it, like to share or pretty close to share the previous front line, if that makes sense. It's really kind of hard to describe, but it's
I think I'm following.
yeah. So you overlay, give them a bigger paddock, and then once they've all moved to the fresh grass, you shrink it to where you want it to be. moving the back line to the, the previous graze line.
Okay. I think I got it.
Yeah.
We gotta take a quick break.
Sure.
Gotta
No problem.
recycle a little coffee. I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right, we're back. What I wanted to ask you about right before we took that break is how long does it take the collars to refresh after you update like where your fences are? How long does it take that update to get pushed out to all the collars?
So this is something we were battling with last year with the power usage and the diminished battery capacity. Inside the app this year, I found a way there's a lower power mode you can set the collars on. So they ping GPS every 15 minutes and update through the cell tower every 15 minutes. The other way is instant. So like every time you open the app, it's like it pings the collars instantly where they are. So we've opted for this lower power mode and an option or in an effort to conserve the battery life. So it takes up to 15 minutes for the collars to load. Sometimes it's 4 minutes, sometimes it's 15. So it really depends on cell bandwidth available, I guess. If everybody's on, it's a little slower. If it's, all the factors of cell signal that we see. So right now we're running on the 15-minute, like power saving mode. So every 15 minutes you get a ping or the system gets a ping as where the animal is. So it can take up to 15 minutes to do that, to do the move. Not that you have to stand there for the full time, but we've slowed it down in an effort to conserve battery. So we can limp along till we get the new ones.
Okay. What are the collars like shoot side? When you bring them down, when you bring them in, you got to work cows, preg check, do whatever. What's it like shoot side? What's it like putting them on, taking them off, changing battery? How much extra messing about does that cause?
If last summer we had a little lesson in the first summer we had a lesson in read the instructions fully before installing, because we didn't do that and they didn't quite catch the system. So we had the opportunity to learn a second time how to put them to the chute effectively, because we had to take the battery out and then wait for whatever 10 or 15 seconds and then reinstall the battery, because we did it too hurriedly the first time around. Some of the batteries didn't connect with the system or weren't being able to be seen by the app. So we got really good at it inadvertently. We have an air-equipped chute, so it's a side catch, side guillotine style versus the slam latch. The slam latch probably would be a little rougher on the collar. The air-equipped
like an auto catch that they can run in.
Yeah, like a Sioux Steel or any one of those, but any of the higher end chutes will handle it just fine. They don't seem to get caught in between the catches, which is good. Putting them on the critter is an experience, and then you really have to play with it to get the chain spacing right, so it's not like super lopsided and looking goofy, with the box hanging off to one side because you have one chain short and one chain long. So you got to kind of play with that. So I was doing the installation. My employee Lauren was doing the catching, with the head catch, and just for consistently, because I got to figure out like, okay, I need about this many links on this side, this many links on this side, and the variable factor is how calm is the animal you're putting it on. A calm old brood cow would be great, but a feeder animal that's full of piss and vinegar, it's a little bit more of a challenge with them throwing their head around, and you don't want to catch the collar bouncing off of them or their head on your nose. So there's some precaution to take there, but once they realize what we're doing, and then definitely the second time through, they were a lot calmer last year, because that's like a new experience. Here's this yearling animal that we were putting them on that never had a collar, never had a chain, anything, and then you introduce this like 2.5 to 3.5 pound thing clanking around underneath them, so that automatically pushes their stress level up a little bit until they're used to it.
Well,
when we did.
you taking their stress level and jacked it way up by just bringing them from the pasture and putting them in confinement and trying to run them down this really narrow alley and all this metal banging.
Yeah,
That's already a tremendous stress load on the animal.
for sure. And then you put us monkeying around their head, around their neck, and installing the thing that they have no idea what it is. Um, when we dealt with them the second time in August, it was no problem because we took all the collars off, charged the batteries, reinstalled all the collars, and there was a lot less thrashing, a lot less, oh my gosh, what are you doing to me? They were just like, okay, yeah, we're putting it back down. Cool. Gonna go to grass, you know?
What's like calves? Everybody complains about loading baby calves on a truck.
Mhm.
Their first time coming to the corrals. It's their first time walking up that loading chute. It's their first time getting on the truck. How fast are you doing some shit the first time you do it? You're not, and then you load up the, 8, 10-year-old cows that almost sort themselves and want to walk on the truck. And that's kind of like, oh, well, that was easy.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of fur to stack together. Um, for those, putting collars on an animal or putting calves on a truck. It's yeah, it's a lot of fur.
What would you change about them?
Obviously, I'd like the batteries to be a little bit, more robust, and they may be in the new updated batteries. So I'll withhold judgment on the batteries till I try the new ones. Um, uh, I'm not, and also my other question is the solar panel enough to keep the battery level high enough for the season? I'd love to be able to put them on once, train them, and then put them out, and I don't have to monkey with the collars until we bring them in the late fall, early winter to go on stored feed. So
The
that
battery
would be ideal.
the battery still seems to be like limiting, even if we're talking like, even if you go to like the Vince collars, which
Mhm.
I haven't been able to get anybody to sit down and really, really talk about them. You're the first guy that's actually been willing to talk about grazing collars, and I'm very grateful for that. But just from talking to him, the battery life has always been the problem. And, like NoFence does it with a replaceable battery, like pop in, pop out, but it's got to be secure enough because it's going to be hanging around a cow's neck for 3 months in between when human hands touch it. And, you talk about the little solar panel. I didn't really see it when you held the box up, but it can't be that big. It's only going to put out just a couple of watts. Well, it doesn't have to be, a huge panel. It just has to have enough just to put just a little bit of energy in that battery every day. And maybe it's not enough. Maybe it's enough to cover like the communication backhaul. And it's not enough to cover an audio alert, definitely not enough to cover, the shock. But if it's more than what it needs just to communicate that day, it's going to build up a little bit of charge for those days that it does have to do an audio or it does have to do a shock alert. But it seems like, and from listening to you talk, it seems like, this year it sounds like you might get 3 or 4 months out of your batteries before you have to bring them in and mess with. And that's one of the things that kind of turned me off was, okay, 6 months. Like it, if I got to bring him in more than every 6 months to change the collar batteries, that's going to be my break even point. That's going to be my no go point because I'm running several hundred across 7,000 acres, and it's a logistical challenge. If I'm on the other corner of the ranch from the corrals and half the collars start dying, that's a huge logistical challenge to get them all back, get them all worked and changed. I mean, you talk about trying to do 40, get them in the chute, get them calmed down so you can work up around the head. I had Cordanes. It's a little bit different challenge when they got, 18 inches or 2 feet of spear hanging off each side of their head. Um, so that was another thing. And, horn cattle are kind of like they're very much in the minority anymore. And, pulled cattle are the thing. Do you think the technology still needs some more maturing? Does it need like another incremental leap before it's viable? Or or how do you feel about it?
I think it's 100% viable. I might not be using it in the way that it was intended for. Like, because we do fairly intensive moves, like once, twice a day, or every other day, depending on where we are in the grazing season. So I think the folks in Norway and Northern Europe intended it to go on mother cows that they turn up into the mountains for the summer, and then they bring back out of the mountains in the fall. And they're like running larger paddocks that maybe they move once a week, not 6 times a week or 5 times a week. So I don't have a baseline to compare it to, but we're using it in a very intensive manner, just like we would reels and step and post. So because that's how we manage our grass. So I don't know if we are the best match for the technology for that intensive use, or if I do need to reach out to them at my contact there and see if there's anything I can do to help, any setting changes that inside the program that I could make to make things smoother and last longer. But as far as like overall viability, I think it's brilliant. A collar costs, I think the NoFence collar is right around $300. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's right around where it is. And then it's maybe $10 or $12 per collar per year subscription to the technology service on the back end. And they have a lifespan of 5 to 7 years. And you probably have to change your battery once, like update the battery. In an ideal situation with the 2G data network that the Europeans have, they're looking at like updating a battery at like 3 to 4 years. Like, that battery's tired and we have to re-up on the battery. But just based on
like half the cost of the unit.
I think so. I actually haven't seen a price on a replacement battery. That's one thing I haven't discovered yet. But just looking at what it saved me for labor last year, it was saving me a half hour to 45 minutes a day for an employee, say, with all the, workers' comp contributions, taxes, wages. You're like, what, 28 bucks an hour, 30 bucks an hour.
Yeah.
That adds up. So in 2 years, you could pay for the 40 to 60, or right around 2 years, you could pay for the 40 to 60 collars, like the initial cost. Maybe it's, I don't remember the napkin math, but like maybe it's 2.5. But that still frees up that time. And you think about like opportunity cost. What could I be doing with that time instead of moving that fence? If I can do it from my phone, I don't have to take the farm rig over there, move them, drive back. I can do it while I'm doing other stuff. So there's that opportunity value, I guess it would be. So it's it saved quite a lot of labor time over the summer, which I was thankful for, and hence I'm doing it again this year.
And that was kind of the next question where I was going is, if somebody came to you and said, "Hey, you want to try this again? Would you sign up and do this again?" It sounds like you definitely would.
I definitely would, and I think I'm probably going to purchase the collars at the end of the study, and just see. I'd like to carry this on and do. I know a 2-year snapshot is just that, a 2-year snapshot. But if we can push it out 3, 4, or 5 years and really kind of push them to their limits, and see what we can do using them, I think it's great for the smaller producer. One of the advantages and I'm not sponsored or paid or anything by NoFence, but one of their advantages is that they work on smaller herds. Like vents, you have to set up base stations. They really don't want to touch a herd under 400 or 500 cows or head or units. I think that's what I heard. So they set up the whole base station, which works great out west. But here in the Northeast, it's so fragmented. Like, you got 40 acres here, I graze 60 over there, I graze 25 here. And then we're moving cattle constantly between the pieces, because of course nothing is contiguous, because we have mountains and towns and all the stuff. So this is a great opportunity for the smaller producers where you don't have to have that like high herd number threshold for the company to even consider working with you, which NoFence will do 1 unit, 10 units, whatever it's like a la carte. There's no minimum, which is kind of handy for the smaller producers. They also have small ruminant collars, which I have no experience with, that they're launching in the study this year. So for sheep and goats. So I could see that being super handy, grazing sheep, solar arrays on solar farms, vegetation management here in the East Coast, ski slope, vegetation management rather than mechanically mowing it.
Well,
Having
you guys
sheep,
do ski some small hills there on the East Coast.
small hills. Listen, we got. Hey man, I was born and bred on the East Coast here, so I can ski anything.
Back in the day, I used to have season passes. I used to have season tickets to ski in Colorado. There was one year I think I did like 14 days in the mountains.
That's awesome.
It
I haven't skied. I haven't skied out west. It's on the bucket list.
do cardio, do lots and lots and lots of cardio. I took a trip to see an old Navy buddy out by Seattle. It was over a decade ago. And he was like, "You want to go skiing?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's go." So we went up to, I think, I'm going to say it wrong, Snohomish. And the top of the mountain, Ben, was 5,500 feet. And yeah, it was a 2,500 foot run downhill. It was great. I'm used to skiing in Colorado where you're up at like 12.1, 12.5 in some of those back bowls and you can't breathe. It's a whole different experience when you're skiing at 5,000 feet and you can actually breathe. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I imagine the snow is also wonderful in Colorado. Wet, heavy snow typically, or a lot of times. And we maxed out. I think Vermont's highest peak is Mount Mansfield. We're like 4,500 feet. But there's some gnarly stuff you can get into. Forgot where I was going with that.
Well, use case. We're talking about the use case for these collars, and I've really thought it for a long time, several years, that a use case for the use case is more like the guys that have 6 months grazing up in the mountains and then 6 months grazing down in the meadows. It's like, okay, when we're going to go to the mountains, we put the collars on, we train them, we send them to the mountains, and we can monitor them in the mountains and control them a little bit. And then when the batteries are starting to die, hopefully we're coming off the mountain and coming back. We pull the collars off, change batteries, do whatever. That seemed to make more sense to me than trying to do what you're doing with NoFence, which is obviously, totally different collars. Because when I was talking with the Vince guys, they seem to think that their collars wouldn't necessarily work in a high stock density situation where you're trying to move the barrier a lot, simply because of power usage. And so I struggle. Like, for me, the way my ranch is set up, even if it wasn't cross fenced, if I just had perimeter around it, I would still struggle trying to find a use case for this technology just because of the costs. But it sounds like it's definitely working for you.
It is, and it also, there was a hidden benefit to the collars. We had some prehistoric flooding last year, crazy rains, and right after or shortly after we recorded the podcast last year, where I physically could not get to this group of cattle for like 5 days. There were no roads to there. They were all gone. And it would have been quite a trek cross country through swollen rivers and some pretty rugged terrain to get there. So had they been behind polywire, they would have been really unhappy and really thin by the time I got there, or they would have broken the polywire, which is more likely, and then it would have been a train wreck. They would have been all over the property, still inside the perimeter fence. But we never lost cell service and we didn't lose power. So I was able to keep moving their front line forward and keep them from destroying the soil, because we'd just been saturated with 10 inches of rain in 24 hours. So had they been in that one paddock, that would have been an absolute muddy mess. But I was able to keep moving their front line forward, keep them in grass, and keep them, me knowing the property fairly well, keep them on the higher ground and make sure they always had access to higher ground that was, lighter soils that they weren't going to tug up, or they have a dry spot to lay down. So that was a hidden benefit that I had not anticipated ever when I was considering these collars. Like, oh, I can move them ahead even if I can't get there. Really thinking about a natural disaster or that type of disaster happening and preventing you from moving cows or moving your animals. So I kept them happy. They stayed well fed and they didn't totally trash the ground, which was, I guess, multi-pronged benefit there.
And they stayed on the farm.
They stayed where they were supposed to be. So they're inside a 3-wire high tensile fence as a hot fence, as a perimeter fence. We're using the NoFence as like polywire surrogate. And yeah, it would have been a minute because I wouldn't have been able to get there. I would have also lost the reel probably. I'm sure they would have broken the reel and had to replace the poly line on it. So yeah, there was benefits I had not even thought of. I hadn't crossed my mind.
What do you have any tips or tricks on getting the animals trained to the collars?
It was actually pretty easy. So as I said, we trained them in a 4 or 5 acre paddock that's right close to the corrals that had great grass in it. So they were in their element. Obviously the hot wires or the outside wires was hot. So that they learned that sound line and the zap line pretty quickly, like I said, 3-4 days. And then they were totally attuned to it. Granted, it wasn't big enough to like practice the moves. So we moved blind essentially. Like their first move from electronic paddock to electronic paddock was on the 45 acre property on the other side of town. So that there was potentially a higher consequence oopsie if it didn't work, but we didn't really have a good setup to a training passion that was big enough to could practice the move and jumping the line. So we just kind of did it and then it worked. So the tips or tricks are the animals are going to figure it out faster than you are. You're going to figure out how to manage the app and the virtual fence line so that the cattle understand, but they understand what you're trying to have them do. I don't know, it's a lot of trial and error.
Okay. What other changes do they have coming down the line? Just incremental improvements, battery.
The battery's the next big one, and I think that was end of July. It should land here. They're always tweaking inside the app and the back end control stuff. Like it looks the app looks a lot cleaner and smoother this year than it did last year. So it's more intuitive, easier to manipulate and go from screen to screen to screen. One thing that I would like to see them do, especially if you're grazing same piece of ground year after year after year with the collars, is be able to shut off, and maybe it's in there, and I've been digging around and have not been able to find it, to shut off the previous year's paddocks. So they're not overlaid on the same property, or so you could color code them. So because right now it's like a blue line, and if I don't go delete all of last year's paddocks, it's an absolute spider web, and it's really hard to differentiate which paddock is the paddock that they're in versus the one that was from last year or from the first rotation or second rotation. So if there's a way we could, and again, I'm not entirely sure this is the intended use for this because of the very frequent daily moves in small paddocks. If there's a way to show those, to differentiate those, like first rotation, second rotation, third rotation, and the previous year, like turn them on and off. And that's probably easily done. I just haven't thought of that inside the app.
Yeah. So I was thinking about Pasture Map and the way Pasture Map does that. So like I have all of my move records from just this year with just the sets of cattle that I have on the ranch. To just display those move records, they have it broken into what's called seasons. So about usually I'll recycle the season kind of late March or early April just to reset all my records. So kind of start off with a blank slate of, we're going to retire all the old subdivisions, all the old temporary subdivisions. We're going to retire all those, get those off the map. We're going to take all these old grazing records. We're going to put them in this box, put them over here. And so they're not polluting the date. So they're not showing up in the data that's actually being displayed from the current season. And I'm not a software engineer, but that's kind of like what I would think would be implementation. So you could have, okay, we're going to retire these paddocks from this grazing rotation. But then if you want to look at them, you can always go back and look and see where they were, and maybe like just drag and drop and say, hey, we want to import this paddock to the current season because I liked that design and it worked, rather than just redrawing everything. Sounds pretty simple, right? Just a couple of cowboys. Sounds pretty simple, but us software engineers, and there's a software engineer probably listening to this, rolling his eyes going, you guys, that is $100,000 and will take 8 weeks to program. Seems simple.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super simple. I have no idea how to do it. It seems simple. So, yeah, that would be like the one way I see an improvement to clean up the app. And like I said, it might be buried in there and I haven't figured out how to do it inside the app. I've been digging around and there may be the setting I haven't found yet. But yeah, it just gets a little cluttered. Very cluttered if you've got multiple rotations for multiple seasons showing on the same overall map. It's yeah.
Well, software development is fun, and watching a piece of software grow and morph and get features added to it, it's kind of fun, especially if you use it almost every day.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's quite evident they made a lot of tweaks to the software over the winter time. So it's like I didn't open it from like December until April, and I went, whoa, this is way different. This make way more sense. It's more intuitive. So
Done that with pasture map. Like, okay, we're done with the grazing season. Just close it out, and you come back 4 or 5 months later and open the tab back up. It's all this stuff. Where'd all this come from?
yeah. One thing thinking about, we were talking about cost effectiveness. So we have a very short grazing season here, or typically short. We're like, I typically graze 200 to 215 days a year. For the Northeast, that's long. But if you go down,
days is not a short grazing season.
Well, our growing season is short. I'll say like May through end of September, right?
Okay.
So, the late grazing is the stockpile stuff from August. So somebody who grazes more year round, like Michael or Hobbs, or somebody where it's easier to graze year round, I think these collars would pay themselves off even faster. So, if you have the opportunity to winter graze and you're grazing stockpile, you don't have to barn up or yard up. I think they would pay for themselves faster and show their work even quicker, I would think, provided the battery life gets sorted out.
What would be your ideal target for battery life? I mean, obviously you'd never have to change a battery. That would be, the batteries would last forever. Obviously that would be the ideal situation. But what would be like kind of a best case scenario for you?
Typically we bring them in once a the season, like mid-August 1 to run them through the chute, usually when we jump properties, when we jump to a different property, we'll bring them back to the home place, run them through the chutes, just do an overall health check and check their weight and see what they're gaining, tweak our grass management per what they're gaining. We're shooting for 2 pounds a day. If we're under that, is it a human factor? Did I not manage them correctly to prevent them from reaching 2? Or is it, is there heavy fly pressure? Maybe I'm missing something in the minerals, or is it just the grass this year? There's all those variables you don't know, but just to get a baseline, so you're not like completely surprised either positively or negatively at the end of the season when you run them across the scales, like in November, you're like, what the hell happened? How come I didn't catch this? So we just try to prevent a wreck if it's something we can prevent. So at that time we could do a battery boost. Like if they're down on battery, I don't mind charging them. it's when they run out of battery, it's really a pain in the butt. They ran out of battery on pasture in the second half of September. I was doing a pasture walk with UVM extension, focusing on the collars, right? And they like tanked. They went down. They were all below 10%, and I could not remove them from. They didn't have enough power to remove themselves from the pasture, and there wasn't enough power to move them forward. So they were like stuck in this purgatory. And and some of the collars did, like I tried cell signal, I tried Bluetooth, and they're in the middle of this like 10-acre square pasture, and they'd run a line, hard line back and forth because they couldn't cross it, even though I'd updated the pasture that they could move. They were low power enough that it wouldn't let them move. So it took like 4 or 5 days for them to all be able to cross that line. And even like putting a polywire back line on them, like stepping them closer and closer to it, it would not cross it because there was still enough power that they would get an audio tone. And at the end of the season, they don't need the power, the shock.
Right.
They're so conditioned to it. So that was a challenge I also didn't see. Don't let them run out of battery on pasture. Otherwise, they're going to be quite difficult to catch. Also, you want to be careful to make sure that when you're moving them from pasture to pasture, so you put them on a truck, on a gooseneck or whatever, out of a corral inside their current paddock, make sure you remove them from their paddock before you drive out with the truck. Made that mistake once. I apologized to them thoroughly because there was like all kinds of tones, and then the truck just started like jumping around because they're all getting whacked at the same time. I'm like, oh my gosh.
While they're in the trailer.
While they're in the trailer, I stopped and I back into the paddock, and then I removed them. I'm like, okay, noted. I got it. Oops. Yeah, that was my fault. My bad. So that's the stuff you don't think about until you make the mistake.
Yeah. I might not have caught that one until I made that mistake too, to be honest with you.
Yep. Yeah. So
well, I think we've kind of beaten collars to death. So what's been new the last year on the Snug Valley farm?
We're kind of in maintaining mode. Like we've grown. It seems like we've been in a perpetual state of growth, and now hopefully we can plateau for a little while and fine tune our systems. Just doing more wholesale distribution through wholesale routes for our grass-fed beef, our pork, and our lamb. So we're kind of angling away from that. We were heavy to direct to consumer through the pandemic. Obviously, that was like we've always been direct to consumer, but we were focusing 100% on that versus our wholesale accounts, and now we're kind of shifting back more toward the wholesale end, selling both whole carcasses to like regional labels or other farms that can't produce enough of their own grass-fed beef to larger regional labels, and then also working with like wholesale distributors to get our stuff into Boston, New York City, and the high-end food stores without me having to drive down there. So that's seems to be working. It's always a moving target and ever changing.
Well, it's interesting that you're dealing with some wholesalers and directly with some retailers. My friend Mike Calicrate, he always likes to caution, getting involved with wholesalers and that kind of thing. Be really interested to circle back in another several months, or do this again in another year, do another, I guess, July update with Snug Valley Farm, and see how those relationships are going and what you've learned from them, because that's, like I said, that's something I hear when I hear people say get in a relationship with a wholesaler. Makes me a little nervous because I understand the abuse of power they have. And okay, keep in mind, like Austin Frerich's book, Barons, it's still in my head. And last night I was invited to a beef producer forum that was put on by the Meat Institute. And if y'all don't know who the Meat Institute is, they're basically a mouthpiece for the packers. And they were saying, well, what challenges do you guys have dealing with packers and processors? And what can we do better? Like, oh, stand by.
So when I say wholesalers, it's our product in retail cuts going. They're pretty much just charging for the moving. and it's a small kind of Northeast regional company that's based out of the same town I'm in, Hardwick. And I know the owner, like she's grown it over the last 10 years and they're really kicking ass, and they move a lot of veggie. They started off as a produce distribution company. So now they're branching and bringing all the cheeses that are being made in the area and high quality meats to the New York City and Boston regional markets, which is really hard for me to go knock on all these cheese and wine store doors or high end grocery stores to try to push my product in. But if they can order a case of our sausage or a case of our burger, it works out really, really well. But for seeming to, we've been working about 4 months with them. So, and it's not super thick yet, but we're building. It's definitely building.
But it's not like you're selling to like a Walmart or a Chipotle.
No,
You're selling to somebody that's actually like has an interest in putting your product where it's going to get the most premium.
right. I mean, we did farmers markets for 20 odd years, like 5 markets a weekend. And that, while we built our brand on that, it is super taxing, and speculative sales really are annoying. Like you might go to a farmer's market, sell $200, you might go sell $2,000. And there was always a reason why the market wasn't a good market. Like, oh, it's too sunny. The Brewers Fest is going on. It was rainy. It was windy. And we realized we were making excuses every market. So that's when we dropped farmers market, and we're pre-pandemic, we're shifting more toward the wholesale end of things, just focusing on wholesale accounts. And then we went back toward the retail end of things. And now we're kind of splitting a bit 50-50 between wholesale and retail or direct to consumer stuff.
Okay. Are you seeing your direct to consumer stuff tail off, or is it staying pretty steady?
So we're doing a once a week home delivery route in northern Vermont. It has definitely tailed off since the peak in 2020, 21, 22. But we also see that every summer as farmers markets are very vibrant in this. We have a very strong farmers market and local food community in northern New England and definitely northern Vermont. So there's options like everywhere. But wintertime comes, farmers markets typically move indoors and are less frequent and are less convenient. So that's when people seem to home order more for us. So we've seen our direct to consumer stuff dip a bit in the summertime, but our wholesale demand has risen. And so it balances out and still makes 100%. It's it seems to be working. I don't know. It's hard to predict, but week to week, but some weeks are great. Some weeks are like, oh boy, I got to make payroll this week. And then, but then there's other weeks like, okay, this is working.
Yeah, this is working. We did this for, another month. We'd be fine.
Right. Do this every week for the next 8 weeks. We'd have our season, but that doesn't always work like that.
Never does. Never is.
No,
Mother Nature always wants to conspire against you, it seems like.
definitely.
All right. I apparently need to get going. My phone is blowing up, which is never a good thing before lunch. I appreciate the conversation today. How would you like to end? What would you, final thoughts, wrap up?
Sure. I don't know. I just, we need to embrace this new technology that might be off the wall. I mean, we're all about breaking paradigms, right? And just because it's not the way we've ever done it doesn't mean it's not the way we shouldn't try to do it. I guess that's a final thought, because I was thinking about that the other night. Like, I get a lot of funny looks when I tell people I have GPS collars on cattle, and I get the holy crap, he's crazy. What are they doing? But you got to start somewhere. I'm not a trendsetter, but I just happen to be doing it. Lucky to be a part of the study. And I think it's going to be once it gets more widespread, it's going to be much more common and understood, and the value of this kind of stuff is going to be understood in both written, conventional and regen ag communities.
Well, yes. And I think the two things I'd like people to take away from this conversation is, number one, these electronic collars, they're potentially another tool in your toolbox to control the movement of animals, which we talk about, we can do with Bob Kinford and his instinctive migrational grazing and herding and placing cattle. You can do it with polywire. You can do it with barbed wire. You can do it with these nifty collars. The other good takeaway I think that I would really like people to leave with is your mask. is that you figured out that these collars are actually going to save you money, save you labor, and be paying for themselves within 2 years. And I think that's a good key point is, people are looking at, they hear $300, $350 upfront cost for a collar, and then $10, $12, I think you said, a year for monitoring, and I haven't had time to fact check that, so I'll just believe you. That's not an inconsequential cost. I mean, even for the monitoring, $1, $2 a month, okay, that's next to nothing. But laying out $300 a month or $300 for a collar, 40 heads not a big deal. 400 heads starts to become a big deal. And the math might change for me on a scale of 400 head or 600 or 800 head. It might not work for me because of the high cost of the cow, because of the high cost of the collars. But then again, somebody that's grazing mountain leases in farther west out in the Colorado that also has, winter ground that they move back and forth to, I could see a use case for fence collars or for no fence collars to monitor the cattle while they're up in the mountains and in really rugged terrain. So I'm still excited about the technology. I'm just kind of, I'm still thinking about the costs. I'm still nervous about that, we're relying on something that's all the way on the right side of a fully unlocked tech tree when there's technologies that are, on the first or second level that could be used to do a similar thing. And I still think that's a valid point. Just,
I guess time will see how it pans out. I mean, I'm excited for the new innovations, but you got to take some of them with a grain of salt. Will they work? Will they not work? Context is key. Like you said, it doesn't work on maybe a 400 head for the upfront cost, but for 40 head or a block of 100 sheep, the small ruminant collars I think are less. I don't know the price, but I know they're less than the big ones. So it makes more. There's advantages and disadvantages to both, and I think we're all going to be part of a bigger case study, whether we know whether it's organized or not.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're going to get on out of here. Ben, I appreciate your time today. Appreciate letting us know about the no fence collars and answering all my semi uneducated questions.
Not a problem. My pleasure. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it.
We'll see you. And you're
All right.
Snug Valley Farmer on TikTok, Snug Valley Farm on Facebook, and Ben Notterman.
Yep. And then Snug Valley Farmer on Instagram.
All right, cool.
Snug Valley Farm, it's snugvalleyfarm.com, whatever. It's all the places.
All right. Appreciate your time again, Ben. Thank you, man.
All right. Have a good one, Brian.
Yep. Have a great week, gang. See ya.